Hey, thanks for coming back to the channel. In this week's video, we are checking out the Sound Devices 970. Now, this unit has been on sale for a good few years, but it really is an incredibly unique piece of equipment, and I've been wanting to share it with you. When I asked Sound Devices if I could borrow one of these, I honestly didn't think they'd agree. As it sits right now on the desktop here with the drives that I've got in here, you'd spend right around $5,500 in the United States at the time of this video to get a hold of one. Now, those who aren't familiar, in the location audio world, that is capturing sound for motion picture, television, gaming, Sound Devices are at the top of their game. They hold nothing back with their professional products, and they have a near obsessive attention to detail. I don't think I know of another recorder with the depth of inputs, points of redundancy, media flexibility, power supply flexibility, and just general configurability as the 970. If you know of one, leave it in the comments below because I'd love to check it out in a future video. Now, I only have it for a short time, so I really can't give a full comprehensive review of all the features. There's just too many of them. I will say that I've yet to encounter a piece of Sound Devices gear that didn't outperform what the marketing said it would do. Reliability and features wise, these are as good as it gets. I've used the Pix video recorders in the field quite often, and if you've used any of those, you're going to feel right at home with the 970. So let's start with the relative basics. We've got 144 total inputs on this machine, configured pretty much however you like. We're just going to work our way across the unit here to make it as easy as possible because this thing is feature-packed. So starting over here, we have dual power inputs. Now these are a 4-pin XLR, and it's a primary and secondary configuration, so if you were to lose one, the other one picks back up. And it shows you on the display what your voltages are coming from each of these, so you can absolutely run these from a battery, and you get a meter for that right up front. Then you've got a USB connection here for connecting up to the computer. Then we have the ability to connect up 64 channels in or out here with MADI. We have time code, in and out again, and then sync in and out over here on the BNC, so you'll have no problem whatsoever connecting up to other professional video equipment or audio equipment for that matter. Then we have a header down here that allows you to connect up remote control devices. You can use a control voltage to trigger events like starting a record or stopping, things like that if you need the ability to trigger this remotely. Very cool. Now with the D-sub connectors, we have 8 channels of line level inputs, we have 8 channels of line level outputs, and below that we have AES channels 1 through 8 in and out. And those are a standard breakout cable you can buy. You can pick those up almost anywhere, terminated to whatever you need on the other end, either XLR or tip ring sleeve or whatever other multi-pin you're using. Below those, we have the ability to plug in 2 more hard drives down there on these eSATA powered ports. So those will do bus power over those. And I'll talk about the hard drive configuration of this machine in just a little bit. Then we have RS422 control. Again, if you want to trigger different events or control the unit externally from another computer or something like a Raspberry Pi or Arduino or even another piece of equipment that can output 422 commands. And next to that, we have a very handy line level on XLR input and output for channels 1 and 2. So if you're connecting this up in a rack and you're just doing stereo recording or a typical video recording type of job and you just need a program feed, you've got left, right, or 1 and 2, however you want to talk about that. Below that, we have 64 channels of Dante set up in a primary secondary configuration, as is pretty standard with all the higher end Dante equipment, and that lets you set that up pretty much any way you want. We'll look at the routing again on the front right now. So let's jump right in with the basics, and that starts with starting this unit up. To do that, you want to hold down the power and audio buttons together and it'll come right to life. Now these units do have a tiny bit of fan noise, but that's not anything I've ever had an issue with in real world use. It's very quiet. So for recording, we can choose 64 channels of monophonic or polyphonic 24-bit at 48K wave files. You can also choose to record at 96K, but then you only get 32 channels of recording. Still very impressive. In addition to the 2 hard drive connectors on the back of the unit, you have 2 sleds that connect up here in the front, and I'm going to pull one of these out while it's running. And this is the hard drive sled. I like these a lot, and mostly because they attach to the drive. But when you're swapping around drives all over the place, it's nice to have something like this connected where you can just plug in a USB 3 cable and pull your files. It also has FireWire and another eSATA powered connection there. You'll see on the front here that you've got indicators for 4 disks. So right now, disk 1 has gone offline. Disk 2 is my primary. 3 and 4 have nothing hooked up. If I open it back up and I insert this drive sled, and this is drive 1, in with a click, close that back up, and you'll see it's mounting, and then it's pulled it back to the primary. So that's a really nice way to see exactly how much time you have left. These are 240 gig drives with 2 channels armed. I've got 225 hours, 44 minutes left on each. Now you can set these up to either record redundantly for multiple copies so you don't have to transfer files at the end of an event. Very handy. You could have redundant records going to the units in the disk 3 and 4 slot, and then you can also set the disks up to record consecutively if you need to do something really long. The 970 uses an exFAT file system, which is compatible with most modern Windows and Mac operating systems, and they've got supported drive sizes listed up to 1 terabyte for SSDs. So conceivably, you could have 4 terabytes of hard drive space mounted just fine. You can get a pair of the caddies and a pair of these drives right now for $775, all loaded, and you will be ready to go. So that $5,500 number I talked about before includes this recorder and this kit, which is 2 of the sleds, 2 of the drives. Let's jump in here real quick and I'll show you how you can arm these tracks. So on every track, we can select the track. You can choose to turn it off, on, you can all off or all on. So if I arm all of the tracks right now, you can see with 64 tracks armed, I would have 7 hours left to record on a 240 gig disk. So that kind of gives you an idea of the drive space you'd be dealing with here. But let's go back in here and I'll show you the rest of the features here on this screen. And you select your track again. We can just page over and we can change the track name. And a little keyboard pops up here. Now you've got a USB input here so you can actually use a real keyboard and type that name in much faster. Very handy. We can also do that in software. So then you have routing. You have the ability to choose your source. So here's our line input, AES, MADI, or Dante, and you can choose any input on the unit here for any channel. And it's as simple as that. Dante channel, a MADI channel, a line input, or an AES channel, it'll simply record to that track. And that's about as difficult as it gets on this unit. Here we have gain, so you can actually gain the tracks up or down, and it goes down as far as minus 25 and then an actual off, and all the way up to a plus 20. So that's quite a bit of gain compensation both up and down there, and that should cover most situations you'd run into. Then we have the option for input delay. Working in various broadcast and video environments, that might be something that's crucial to you. So those are your primary controls, and it makes it very easy to set this unit up. So I was using tracks 1 and 2 to record Dante inputs from the Sound Devices MD4 for the intro to this video. Now that I'm using this and pulling it apart and stuff, I'm recording to Waves Tracks Live using the same mic pre's and audio chain. Now, part of what makes this unit so good and so expensive is the redundancy that's built in all across this unit. We talked about the redundant disk capability. There's redundant power capability that I mentioned before. So you can see up here, I've got 12 volts in on my primary supply. I don't have a secondary supply here right now, so there's 0 volts. But if you were connected up to a battery in a mobile application, that can be incredibly helpful to have that right on the front there. Now, let's go over the rest of these controls real quick, just so you have an idea of what's going on the front panel. Let's start up at the top left. You have headphone select, and you can select the source for the headphones, and that is over here in audio, headphone source. And right now we're hearing all tracks summed to stereo. You can choose all tracks summed to mono, or you can choose any pair of tracks going in even pairs. Next, you can see we have our word clock reference. We've got Dante set as our primary clock source, and we're running at 48K. And over here, we simply have a counter for the playhead and where you are in your track. Down here on the bottom left, we have time code running. I've got this set to free run, so that's just going to run all the time. Now with this unit, like most professional units, it'll generate that time code as it is right now, and you can use that to either connect to other equipment. You can do what's called jam syncing other equipment, where you connect it just briefly just to get them in sync, and then you disconnect them again to continue on. The next item on the display here is our frame rate, and right now I'm running that at 29.97, and we can go in here and take a look at the other frame rate options. Let's see what we've got. We've got 23.97, 2976, 24, 25, 2997, 2997 drop frames. So right now I've got it to no drop, 30 frames, and then 30 frame drop. So those are all the different standards. You will use those interchangeably depending on the job you are doing and the requirements of the production. So nothing unusual there, but you certainly have a lot of options. And here's the rest of your options for time code and sync. As you can see, you've got control over absolutely everything here. If there's a feature you need that's not in this unit, you're doing some pretty advanced stuff. So the last item on the screen here is the current file name. Now that gets us into some of the really interesting stuff that this unit and most of Sound Devices recorders can do that you might not be familiar with if you've never worked with them before. And that is the data that they record along with your audio is very comprehensive. This file system that Sound Devices uses is incredibly robust, and it really does give you every possible opportunity to input information about what you're recording and how you want to keep track of it. So that way, when you need to hand this off to the next engineer in line, they know what the heck you're doing and they can put it into their system very quickly. Now, Sound Devices also uses a file safe system, and according to their literature, it records to an intermediate format and then finalizes the files after the recording, and that keeps the recorded files intact and recoverable in the event of a failure. The file safe utility software is available to download at sounddevices.com, and I'll link that below if you want to check it out, and that can be used for file recovery. So that's another level of redundancy there. Should the worst happen, you will be able to save your files. And another way that they ensure that is, in addition to the dual power inputs, either of which could easily be driven by a battery, they also use what they call power safe technology that keeps 10 seconds of power in reserve in the unit at all times. So if you were to lose power from your primary or secondary source, the unit will continue to run for the remaining seconds, then it'll shut itself down cleanly and not lose your files. So let's go ahead and give that a try. We're going to arm all of the tracks and we're just going to hit record. So that's recording right now, and it's just recording nothing. There's nothing plugged into the unit, but I'm just going to undo the power and we'll see what happens. So here's the power supply. Now I'm going to unplug it. Temporary power loss, terminating any recording and powering down in 6, 5, 4, and I repower it, and power loss detected just goes in the event menu. No, power should be back. Okay, power's back. Hang in there. So I went ahead and said okay, and yeah, obviously that works. That's absolutely brilliant. You've got 10 seconds of backup. Now let's give that another try and see what actually happens and see if this file survives. So I've unplugged it again, power loss, it's counting down, and let's see how this shuts down from a recording state. See what happens here. 3, 2, 1, off it goes. It stops the recording, it offlined both discs, and then shut down. That is the reason these are worth the money they cost. So I'm not really sure if Sound Devices will ever send me anything again if I do this, because I definitely didn't ask permission, but they seem like pretty cool people, and I think they've made it pretty easy. I'm not going to disassemble anything. I'm just going to have a look. So hopefully they don't get mad. Just going to be very gentle. This is a very expensive unit. So that's the case there for you, and it's just pretty simple. I like that. Just very simple. I really like the way they put stuff together. So you'll notice everything on this unit is modular. So The power inputs are on their own board, and they come free of the main board and could be replaced quite easily if you were to have some sort of destructive event. And then you can see around this side you have your line level inputs and very nice shielded flat flex cables. In fact, all of the flat flexes in here you'll see are, well, the exception of that one, are shielded. There's the battery right there, and that just looks like a standard, like off the shelf battery. Let's have a look here at this guy, what we're actually dealing with. That just looks like a standard 7.4 volt, 2200 milliamp hour lithium ion battery. You know, that again is on a header, so presumably that'd be very easy to change if it came down to it. I don't know if this is something you buy off the shelf necessarily, but assuming Sound Devices would have a part for you on that if you needed one. There's the fan. So this is the guy here making all the racket. So let's power it up and see what happens. You can see we've got lights on inside. I don't know if you can see those LEDs have popped on the main board. Yeah, that's not very loud at all. And nothing else in here, there's no other moving parts. There's absolutely nothing else going on internally, moving parts-wise. Let's load up a drive and see what happens. So we're going to load up drive 1, and we'll load up drive 2. And yeah, there's no other moving parts. So that's the entire unit as far as noise goes. Very quiet. So you can see here where the two drive bays slot in, and those are identical, just sandwiched, so one drive actually installs upside down from the other. So there's a backup battery in there just to keep the memory and all of your settings stored between uses. That has nothing to do with the lithium ion battery that actually powers the unit down. This just acts as a extra supply essentially. And without going too much further, that's just a pretty good look inside, an example of how these are built. You can absolutely repair these, and at very least you can absolutely send them in for repair. As with everything from Sound Devices, these are meant to be used, not necessarily abused, but they can take it. So that's a look at the 970. So that's it for the 970. I hope you found this, if not informational, at least interesting to take a look at these. And next time you have a large channel count show, you might think about one of these units. The great part about Sound Devices equipment, in my experience, is that the markets they're directed at are huge in rentals. So it's very easy to find a deck like this. If you just need it for a one-off or a short-term production, you can generally rent this kind of stuff pretty affordably compared to trying to piece together a bunch of cheaper equipment to accomplish the task. So very, very easy to rent these. They're incredibly robust, and I would definitely give them a try if you have any high channel count or just straight up demanding, high profile recordings coming up that you absolutely have to guarantee you're going to get the files. Check it out. Let me know down below if you have any questions about this unit or anything I talked about in this video. And as always, thanks to everybody who supports the channel, including companies like Sound Devices who are willing to send these over to let me borrow them for a little while, and even hopefully they don't mind that I took this one apart. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.